Young woman helped an elderly lady in a wheelchair, not knowing her millionaire nephew was watching. Lucy Fields hurried through the flooded streets of Seattle, trying to protect herself from the rain with a cheap umbrella that threatened to turn inside out at any moment. With a heavy backpack on her shoulders and her already damp hospital uniform, she could barely see the path ahead when she heard a groan of frustration. That's when she spotted an elderly lady in a wheelchair, completely soaked, struggling to move the wheels that were stuck in a deep puddle. Without thinking twice, Lucy dropped her umbrella and ran to help, ignoring that she was now getting completely wet. "Are you all right, ma'am? Let me help you," Lucy said, positioning herself behind the wheelchair. "Oh, my dear, thank you so much," the elderly woman replied, her voice trembling from the cold. "I've been stuck here for almost half an hour. No one stopped to help me." Lucy pushed the wheelchair forcefully, freeing it from the mud. Her shoes and pants were splattered with muddy water, but she didn't care. She picked up her fallen umbrella and held it over the woman, leaving herself exposed to the rain that fell mercilessly. "Where do you live? I can walk you home," Lucy offered, quickly checking her watch to see she was already late for her second job. "It's just down the block, that greenhouse with the white gate," the elderly woman responded, pointing with a wrinkled hand. "But I don't want to trouble you. You seem to be in a hurry." "It's no trouble at all," Lucy replied with a smile, as she began pushing the wheelchair. What neither of them noticed was the man in a suit observing the entire scene from inside a black limousine parked at the corner. Richard Montgomery, one of the city's most influential businessmen, slightly lowered his dark glasses, intrigued by the act of kindness he had just witnessed. "Sir, shall we proceed to the meeting?" his driver asked. Richard hesitated for a moment, his eyes still fixed on the young woman who was walking away, pushing the wheelchair. "Who is that lady in the wheelchair?" Richard asked. "Mrs. Margaret Williams, sir, your aunt." Richard frowned, surprised. "And the caregiver I hired, where is she?" The driver shook his head. "I cannot say, sir." Richard gestured for the driver to wait and took out his phone, discreetly photographing the young woman. "Find out who this girl is," he ordered, "and call the caregiving agency. I want explanations." Meanwhile, Lucy arrived with Mrs. Williams at the small house. She was shocked to see the precarious conditions of the place: leaks in the ceiling, dampness on the walls, and an improvised ramp at the entrance. "Your caregiver isn't here?" Lucy asked, helping the elderly woman inside. Mrs. Williams gave a tired smile. "She rarely shows up, dear. Says the payment is always late." Lucy felt a pang of indignation. How could they abandon a woman of her age? "Have you eaten today?" Mrs. Williams shook her head. "Don't worry about me, I'm used to it." Lucy bit her lip, torn. She was late for her job at the pharmacy, but how could she leave the woman alone in that state? "I'll prepare something quick for you to eat. Then I need to go, but I promise to come back tomorrow to check on you," she said, heading to the kitchen. "You don't need to, dear. You've already done too much," Mrs. Williams protested. But Lucy was already opening the nearly empty refrigerator. In his mansion, in the city's most prestigious neighborhood, Richard entered his private office. On the wall, an impressive collection of diplomas and awards attested to his business success. He loosened his tie and sat in the leather armchair, thoughtful. His assistant entered with a folder. "Sir, here's the information you requested about the young woman." Richard opened the folder and saw the photo of the young woman who had helped, his aunt. Lucy Fields, 24 years old, nursing student, works as an intern at Greenwood Medical Center during the day and as a clerk at neighborhood pharmacy at night. Lives alone in a small rented apartment downtown. Parents died in an accident. 5 years ago, no siblings. Excellent grades in college, but has had to take leave twice due to financial issues. Richard closed the folder, intrigued. A young woman with so many difficulties stopping to help a stranger, while the professional caregiver he paid generously wasn't fulfilling her obligations. And what about the caregiving agency? They claimed the employee had a family emergency and couldn't notify anyone. They're sending a replacement tomorrow. Richard dismissed him and, when alone, opened his desk drawer. Inside was an old photograph, him as a child next to Mrs. Williams, much younger, both smiling in front of a Christmas tree. It had been years since he had visited his aunt in person, limiting himself to sending money and hiring services for her. The next day, Lucy kept her promise. After her shift at the hospital, she visited Mrs. Williams, bringing some fruit she managed to buy with her tight budget. To her surprise, she found a caregiver there. "Good afternoon, I'm Lucy, Mrs. Williams's friend," she introduced herself. The caregiver, a middle-aged woman with a bored expression, merely nodded. "I'm the new caregiver, the other one was fired." Lucy found Mrs. Williams in the living room looking uncomfortable. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, kissing her forehead. "Better now that you're here, my dear," the elderly woman replied, her eyes brightening. "This young lady has already given me a bath and food, but she doesn't talk to me." Lucy smiled. Anne sat down beside her. "I brought some fruit and also this book," she said, taking a used novel from her bag. "Do you like to read?" Mrs. Williams's face lit up. "Oh, my dear, I was a literature professor for over 30 years. Books are my passion, but my eyesight isn't what it used to be. I can read to you if you'd like." For the next hour, Lucy read aloud while Mrs. Williams listened, fascinated, occasionally interrupting to comment on a passage or offer a literary analysis that impressed the young woman. "You really do know a lot about literature," Lucy commented. "I taught at the University of Washington for decades, you know," Mrs. Williams said proudly. "I even have some published books." Lucy's eyes widened. "Really? That's amazing. At the same university where I study nursing." "Yes, the very same. What a wonderful coincidence," exclaimed Mrs. Williams, squeezing the young woman's hand. "You know, I would love to talk more about literature. It's been years since I've had someone to discuss my favorite books with. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out." Now continuing. In the weeks that followed, a routine was established. Lucy visited Mrs. Williams whenever she could between her jobs and studies. The hired caregiver only did the basics, treating the elderly woman with professional coldness, while Lucy brought the human warmth that Mrs. Williams so desperately needed. During these visits, Lucy discovered that the house where Mrs. Williams lived was only a small part of what had once been a large family property. Most of it had been sold or transferred to her nephew, the elderly woman's only living relative. "Richard was such a sweet boy," Mrs. Williams commented one afternoon, showing old photographs. "I took care of him when my sister fell ill, but after he made his fortune in business, we rarely see each other. He sends money, hires people to help me, but never has time for a visit." Lucy noticed the sadness in the woman's eyes. All that money didn't replace the presence of family. Richard, meanwhile, had instructed his assistant to keep an eye on Lucy. He received regular reports about her visits and how she treated his aunt. Intrigued and impressed, he decided to meet her personally, but without revealing his identity. The opportunity arose when he discovered that Lucy had received an eviction notice from the small apartment where she lived. The building would be converted into a luxury condominium in 3 months. Through one of his companies, he sent Lucy an administrative job offer with a salary that was double what she earned in her 2 current jobs. When she appeared for the interview, Richard received her as Mr. Mitchell, a simple manager. Lucy was nervous but determined. Wearing the only formal outfit she owned, she entered the imposing company headquarters. "Miss Fields," Richard greeted her, wearing different glasses and using a false name. "Your resume impressed me." "Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, but I must admit I'm confused. I don't remember sending a resume to this company." Richard smiled. "Your name was recommended. We're looking for people with your profile." The interview continued, with Richard asking questions that sought to reveal Lucy's character more than her professional skills. She spoke honestly about her financial difficulties, mentioning that she needed the job not only for herself, but also to continue helping an elderly friend who has become important in her life. "And why is this lady so important to you?" Richard asked, trying to hide his personal curiosity. "She reminds me of my grandmother," Lucy replied simply. "And nobody should spend their final years feeling abandoned, you know. Mrs. Williams has so much knowledge, so many incredible stories to share. It's sad to see how our society discards the elderly." Richard felt a twinge of guilt, but maintained his composure. "Well, Miss Fields, the job is yours. You can start. Monday. Lucy could hardly believe it. With the new salary, she could find another apartment and still have money left to help Mrs. Williams improve her house. She accepted the offer immediately. On Monday, Lucy started her new job. She was assigned to the administrative department, where she mainly handled documents and correspondence. To her surprise, the work wasn't as demanding as she expected, and her schedule allowed her to continue her studies and visit Mrs. Williams regularly. What she didn't know was that Richard was discreetly observing her, testing her integrity. He intentionally left confidential documents within her reach, including information about a major real estate project his company was planning. One afternoon, while organizing files, Lucy found plans and documents for a new commercial development. Looking more closely, she recognized the address. It was exactly where Mrs. Williams' house was located. According to the papers, the entire area would be demolished in 6 months. Lucy felt her heart race. How was this possible? Mrs. Williams had never mentioned selling her house. In fact, the elderly woman often spoke about how she wished to remain there until her final days. Concerned, Lucy decided to investigate further. In the days that followed, she discreetly searched for more information, discovering that the property had been legally transferred to a holding company belonging to Richard Montgomery, Mrs. Williams' nephew. Is he planning to force his own aunt out of her home without even consulting her? Lucy thought, indignant. Determined to confront the situation, Lucy requested a meeting with her boss, Mr. Mitchell. To her surprise, she was directed straight to the main office, where she found not the manager who had hired her, but the imposing Richard Montgomery, whose face she recognized from business newspapers and magazines. Mr. Montgomery, I'm sorry. There must be some mistake. I asked to speak with Mr. Mitchell, Lucy said, confused. Richard rose from his chair, removing the glasses he used as a disguise. There's no mistake, Miss Fields. I am Richard Mitchell Montgomery, the Mr. Mitchell who hired you. Lucy was paralyzed, the pieces of the puzzle starting to fit together. You're Mrs. Williams's nephew. Richard nodded, indicating a chair for her to sit down. How did you find out? Lucy took a deep breath, gathering courage. I found the plans to demolish the house where she lives. Are you really going to force your aunt out without even consulting her? The frankness of the question caught Richard by surprise. Few people in his company would dare question him this way. Miss Fields, business is complex. That area has enormous commercial potential. I'm planning to move my aunt to a luxury care facility where she'll have all the necessary care. But she loves that house, Lucy protested. She has memories, books, a lifetime there. She's told me several times that her greatest wish is to remain in her own home. Richard crossed his arms, studying the young woman before him. It was evident that she truly cared about his aunt. Why do you care so much, Miss Fields? What do you gain by helping an elderly woman you barely know? Lucy felt her face burn with indignation. Not everything in life is about gaining something. Mr. Montgomery, sometimes we help because it's the right thing to do. Your aunt is an amazing woman who has been neglected. She misses you, you know. She shows me photos from when you were a child, talks about how intelligent and kind you were. What happened to that boy? The comment hit Richard deeply. He turned to the window, recalling moments from his childhood with the aunt who had raised him after his mother's illness. When he turned back to Lucy, his expression had softened. You don't understand, Miss Fields. I'm doing this for her own good. That house is falling apart. It's no place for a woman of her age. Then renovate. The house, Lucy suggested simply. You have the resources for that, don't you? And if you really care about her well-being, ask her what she wants instead of deciding for her. A heavy silence fell over the room. Richard had never been confronted like this, especially by a newly hired employee. I'll consider your words, he finally said, but I need you to understand something. I hired you to observe how you treated my aunt. I wanted to know if you were really as kind as you seemed, or if you had some interest in her money. Lucy stood up, feeling betrayed. So all of this was a test? The job? The trust? All fake? The job is real, Richard replied. Your performance has been excellent, regardless of my initial motivations. Lucy shook her head, disappointed. I'll continue helping your aunt, Not for you or for the job, but because I promised her. As for the rest, I need to think." When Lucy left the office, Richard stared at the closed door with conflicting feelings. For the first time in years, someone had made him question his decisions. And most surprisingly, it was a young woman with no power or influence, just a strong sense of justice. That night, Lucy visited Mrs. Williams as usual, but she was visibly disturbed. "What's wrong, my dear?" the elderly woman asked, noticing the change in her behavior. Lucy hesitated. Should she tell her about her encounter with Richard? About the plans to demolish the house? "Just problems at work," she responded vaguely. "Ah, that new job you got, how's it going?" Lucy forced a smile. "It's different from what I expected." Mrs. Williams took her hand. "You know, Lucy, in all my years teaching literature, I learned that the best stories are those where characters face the truth, no matter how difficult it may be. I don't know what's bothering you, but whatever it is, face it with honesty." The wise words touched Lucy deeply. She decided she needed to be honest, but feared hurting the elderly woman. "Mrs. Williams, I met your nephew Richard." The elderly woman's expression immediately changed, a mixture of surprise and hope. "Richard? Did he come here?" "No, actually." Lucy took a deep breath. "He's my boss. The new job I got is at one of his companies." Mrs. Williams's eyes widened. "What? Richard hired you? Does he know you know me?" "Actually, that's why he hired me. He saw me helping you that rainy day. He was in the limousine, watching." Tears began to form in the elderly woman's eyes. "So he still cares about me?" Lucy sat beside her, holding her hands. "He does care in his own way. Mrs. Williams, there's something I need to tell you." Before she could continue, the telephone rang. The caregiver answered and called for Lucy. "It's for you, a man named Richard Montgomery." Surprised, Lucy answered the phone. "Miss Fields," Richard's voice sounded tense. "I need you to come to St. Cross Hospital immediately. It's about my aunt." "Your aunt? But she's here with..." "Me. No, it's not about her health. It's about the community center where she participates in activities. There's been an incident. I'd like you to be present when I go there." Confused, Lucy agreed. She quickly explained the situation to Mrs. Williams, promising to return the next day with all the answers. At the hospital, she found Richard in the administrative area, talking with the director. Seeing her, he stepped aside to speak privately. "Thank you for coming. I wanted you to see this," he said, handing her an official document. It was a notice of closure for the St. Clair Senior Community Center due to lack of funds and structural problems. The same center that Mrs. Williams attended weekly for her social activities. "This will devastate her," Lucy murmured. "That center is one of the few joys in her life. Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want your help," Richard replied. "After our conversation today, I've been thinking, you're right. I've been making decisions for my aunt without considering her wishes. That has to change." Lucy observed him, still skeptical. "And what do you plan to do?" "I'm going to finance the complete renovation of the center, and I want to hire you to coordinate the project with full autonomy. You understand the needs of the elderly better than any executive in my company." The proposal caught Lucy by surprise. "Why me? There are much more qualified professionals, because you have something they don't, genuine concern for these people's well-being, and my aunt trusts you." Lucy considered the offer. It was an incredible opportunity to make a difference in the lives of Mrs. Williams and other seniors in the community. But there was still one problem. "What about her house? Do you still plan to demolish it?" Richard hesitated. "It's complicated. That land..." "It's not just land to her," Lucy interrupted. "It's the home where she's lived her entire adult life, where she raised you for a time. How can you put a price on that?" The words hit Richard like a punch to the stomach. Long-buried memories surfaced, afternoons studying with his aunt, who patiently explained math and literature, winter nights around the fireplace, listening to stories, the unconditional support he received when he decided to pursue a business career against his father's wishes. "You're right," he finally admitted. "Let's go there now. I want to talk to her." The reunion between aunt and nephew was emotional. When Richard entered the small living room, Mrs. Williams could hardly believe her eyes. For a moment, they just looked at each other, decades of distance hanging between them. "Richard, is it really you?" The elderly woman's voice faltered. "Yes, Aunt Maggie," he answered, approaching timidly. "I'm sorry I haven't come before." Mrs. Williams opened her arms, and to Lucy's surprise, the powerful businessman's eyes filled with tears as he embraced his aunt. "How you're so thin, don't you eat properly?" was the elderly woman's first question, making everyone laugh and breaking the tension. Over the next few hours, aunt and nephew talked, catching up on life. Richard explained about his work, his projects, and finally, with Lucy's encouragement, addressed the issue of the house. "Aunt, this house needs urgent repairs. It's not safe for you." Mrs. Williams's face hardened. "You're going to send me to a nursing home, aren't you? Like your father wanted to do with my sister." Richard was shocked by the accusation. "No, Aunt, I would never do that. I want to renovate this house, adapt it to your needs." "Then why did you buy the land?" "I thought it was to force me to leave," the elderly woman replied, surprising both Richard and Lucy. "How do you know about that?" Mrs. Williams smiled enigmatically. "I may be old, my dear, but I'm not foolish. I receive mail, I read newspapers, and I have friends at the community center who keep me informed." Richard looked at Lucy, who was as surprised as he was. "The truth is that I bought the land to protect it from speculators," Richard explained. "But I confess that I recently considered a commercial project for the area. It was a mistake, Aunt. I won't proceed with it anymore. And the community center, I heard it's going to close." Richard held his aunt's hand. "Don't worry, I'm going to finance the complete renovation. In fact, I've invited Lucy to coordinate the project." Mrs. Williams's eyes sparkled. "Lucy, our Lucy!" The hour didn't go unnoticed by either of them. "Yes, Aunt. Miss Fields has proven to be an exceptional person," Richard said, looking at Lucy with newfound respect. "Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. In the weeks that followed, a transformation began. Architects and workers invaded Mrs. Williams's house, beginning a complete renovation under Lucy's supervision, who insisted on maintaining the essence and memories of the place, only modernizing it and making it more accessible. During the renovation, Mrs. Williams stayed in a suite at Richard's mansion, where, to everyone's surprise, including her nephew himself, she quickly adapted and began transforming the cold, impersonal environment. With her warm presence, the mansion staff, accustomed to Richard's rigidity and formality, were charmed by Mrs. Williams, who insisted on knowing each of them by name and hearing their stories. Gradually, Richard himself began to notice the change in the atmosphere of his home. One afternoon, returning from a meeting, he found his aunt in the library, surrounded by 3 employees who were listening, fascinated, to her stories about the great authors of American literature. "And that's how I met Ernest Hemingway," she concluded, as everyone laughed at a particularly amusing anecdote. Seeing her nephew, the employees quickly dispersed, embarrassed. "No, don't worry," Richard said, surprising everyone. "Continue. I'd like to hear that story myself. I didn't know you met Ernest Hemingway, Aunt." Mrs. Williams smiled. "There are many things you don't know about me, Richard. We have a lot of time to catch up." That moment marked a turning point in their relationship. Richard began to have lunch regularly with his aunt, rediscovering her company and, more importantly, listening to her stories and advice. Meanwhile, Lucy was coordinating not only the renovation of the house, but also the revitalization of the community center. Richard, impressed with her efficiency and vision, entrusted her with increasing responsibilities. One day, while reviewing some old documents for the renovation, Lucy made a surprising discovery. The property where Mrs. Williams's house stood, and part of the adjacent land, did not legally belong to Richard, but to Mrs. Williams herself. The elderly woman had never signed the transfer papers that Richard believed had been processed years ago. Confused and concerned, Lucy hesitated about what to do with that information. She decided to consult Mrs. Williams first, before speaking with Richard. When she showed the documents to the elderly woman, she didn't seem surprised. "I know, dear, I always knew. But why didn't you say anything when Richard talked about demolishing the house?" Mrs. Williams sighed deeply. Because I wanted to see how far my nephew would go. I wanted to understand if he really didn't care about me anymore, or if he was just lost in that business world, and also, she paused, because I knew he needed a lesson. Lucy was impressed by the elderly woman's astuteness. And now, will you tell him? You will, my dear. You've become the bridge between us. You're the right person for this. Reluctantly, Lucy agreed. The next morning, she requested a meeting with Richard in his office. Mr. Montgomery, I found something you need to see, she said, placing the documents on the desk. Richard examined the papers and turned pale. This isn't possible. I'm sure I processed the transfer of these lands years ago. Apparently not, sir. Your aunt is still the legal owner, and from what I understand, she always knew this. Richard fell back in his chair, stunned. Why didn't she say anything? Why did she let me plan a development on land that wasn't even mine? Maybe she wanted to see if you would really do it, if you would really take her out of her home without considering her feelings, Lucy suggested. The realization of how he had been manipulated by his aunt almost made Richard smile. The old professor still had much to teach him. She was always smarter than all of us, he murmured. There's one more thing, Lucy continued. I found her notes indicating that some investments made with her money may not have been properly managed. This caught Richard's attention. What investments? Lucy showed him the meticulous notes Mrs. Williams had kept over the years, recording amounts sent to an account that Richard supposedly managed for her. The numbers didn't match the reported returns. Impossible, said Richard, checking the documents. I've always managed her money with the same care I manage my own. Unless... His expression changed to one of shock when understanding hit him. Julian, he murmured. My former financial manager. Quickly, Richard picked up the phone and requested his team to bring all financial records related to his aunt's accounts from the last 10 years. When he hung up, his face was tense. Miss Fields, thank you for bringing this to my attention. I'll investigate immediately. What do you think happened? Until 3 years ago, my family's personal finances were managed by Julian Fisher, a man I considered completely trustworthy. He suddenly resigned, citing health problems, and moved abroad. Now, I'm beginning to suspect his departure may have been for other reasons. In the days that followed, an investigation revealed that Julian had systematically diverted funds from Mrs. Williams's accounts, masking the transactions with false reports. Richard was furious, not only at the betrayal but for not having noticed what was happening under his nose. When confronted with the truth, Mrs. Williams reacted with surprising serenity. Money comes and goes, Richard. What matters is that the truth has come to light. I'll recover every penny, Aunt, and that scoundrel will pay for what he did. Mrs. Williams held her nephew's hand. Don't waste energy on revenge. Use it to rebuild what was lost, including our relationship. The wise words touched Richard deeply. He realized there was much more to learn from his aunt than he had imagined. With the house renovation nearly complete and the community center functioning again, Mrs. Williams seemed to rejuvenate. Her enthusiasm was contagious, especially when she proposed starting a literary mentoring program for young students at the center. I'll teach these young people to love literature as I do, she declared enthusiastically. Lucy, can you help me organize this? Lucy, who now divided her time between coordinating the center, her nursing studies and her work at Richard's company, felt honored by the invitation. Of course, Mrs. Williams. It would be my pleasure. Richard, observing the scene, felt a wave of gratitude. If it hadn't been for Lucy, he might never have rediscovered the value of his aunt and almost committed the error of removing her from her home in the name of progress. Miss Fields, he called, may I speak with you privately? Moving a little away, Richard made an unexpected proposal. I want to offer you an apartment on my aunt's property, next to her house. I know you were evicted from yours and have been looking for a new place. Lucy was surprised. That's very generous, but... It's not charity, Richard interrupted. It's a job offer. You would continue coordinating the community center and helping care for my aunt. You would be properly compensated, of course, and could complete your nursing studies without financial worries. Lucy hesitated, suspicious. Why are you doing this? Are you trying to buy me off so I won't talk about the financial issues we discovered? Richard seemed genuinely hurt. "Is that what you think of me, after everything we've been through?" "I'm sorry, but I have to ask. Your world is very different from mine, Mr. Montgomery." "Richard," he corrected. "Please call me Richard. And I'm doing this because you've changed my life and my aunt's for the better. You reconnected us. You brought light to a house that had been dark for years. This is my thank you." The sincerity in his words was evident. Still, Lucy needed time to think. "May I consider your offer?" "Of course. Take all the time you need." The next evening, Lucy discussed the proposal with Mrs. Williams, who was radiant. "Oh, my dear, it would be wonderful to have you living so close. But I understand your hesitations. Richard has always been intense in his gestures. I don't know if it's right to accept something so valuable," Lucy confessed. "I've always fought for everything on my own." Mrs. Williams smiled wisely. "You know what's the biggest lesson I've learned in my entire life? That sometimes we need to learn to receive. You've given me so much, Lucy. Your time, your company, your respect, and perhaps this is the moment to allow the universe to give back." The elderly woman's words resonated deeply. Days later, Lucy accepted the offer, with the condition that the apartment be considered part of her compensation for the work, not a gift. "We have an agreement then," said Richard, extending his hand. When they shook hands, something changed in the dynamic between them. They were no longer employer and employee, nor benefactor and protégé. They were partners in a common mission, to care for Mrs. Williams and bring more humanity to both their lives. Mrs. Williams' renovated house was inaugurated with a small party. Adapted for her reduced mobility, it maintained the essence and memories of the place, but now with comfort and safety. Adjacent to the main house, a small and modern apartment awaited Lucy. The community center, in turn, became a model in the city. In addition to traditional activities for seniors, it now housed Mrs. Williams's literary mentoring program, which quickly became a success among young students. On a sunny afternoon, 3 months after all these events, Mrs. Williams observed from her adapted porch the garden that Lucy and Richard had planted together. In the distance, she saw the two animatedly discussing future plans for the community center. "Look at them, Joseph," the elderly woman said, speaking to the portrait of her late husband that she always kept nearby. "Who would have thought that my workaholic nephew and our dear nurse would become so close? I think I've finally found the perfect guardians for our legacy." At the company, Richard implemented significant changes. Inspired by his experience with Lucy and his aunt, he created a social responsibility program aimed at the elderly and low-income students, offering scholarships and employment opportunities. Lucy, meanwhile, completed her nursing studies with honors and, in addition to coordinating the community center, implemented a preventive health program for seniors that soon became a reference in the region. 1 year after that rainy afternoon when their lives intersected, Richard organized a special celebration at the community center. The event marked not only Mrs. Williams' birthday, but also the official inauguration of the Professor Margaret Williams Library, a space in the center dedicated to literature and education. During the ceremony, a surprise awaited Mrs. Williams. Richard and Lucy had found and gathered several of her former students, including some who had become nationally recognized writers. One by one, they took the stage to thank the teacher who had changed their lives. Tears of emotion ran down Mrs. Williams's wrinkled face as she listened to the testimonials. "I never imagined so many would still remember me," she murmured to Lucy, who held her hand. "How could they forget someone so special?" the young woman replied, moved. At the end of the ceremony, Richard took the stage for a speech. "Just over a year ago, I was a different man," he began. "I thought success was measured by the size of the bank account and the number of developments. It took a brave young woman," he looked at Lucy, "to remind me that true value lies in people, in connections, in the stories we share." His voice broke with emotion. "My Aunt Maggie was my first teacher in life. Then I lost myself in the paths of ambition and forgot her most important lessons. Thanks to Lucy, I was able to rediscover not only my aunt, but also a part of myself that I had forgotten." Emotional applause filled the hall. When the formal celebration ended, the three, Richard, Lucy, and Mrs. Williams, remained together, talking and laughing like the family they had become. "You know what moves me the most?" Mrs. Williams commented, observing the center full of life. "Seeing how a small act of kindness can trigger such a great transformation." Lucy nodded. "I never imagined that helping a lady stuck in the rain would change my entire life. And I never imagined that observing that act of kindness from the window of my limousine would make me rethink everything I considered important," added Richard. "That reminds me of a quote from one of my favorite books," said Mrs. Williams. "Sometimes it's the small gestures that move mountains." The night advanced, and the guests began to say goodbye. Richard helped his aunt return home, with Lucy by his side. On the porch under the starry sky, the three contemplated the future they were building together. "Thank you for saving me," Mrs. Williams suddenly said. "Save you?" Lucy asked, confused. "It was you who saved us, Mrs. Williams. Your wisdom, your strength?" The elderly woman smiled. "Perhaps we all saved each other in some way. I was losing hope on that rainy day, you know. I thought my useful days were over, that all I had left was to wait for time to pass. Then a young woman appeared, dropped her umbrella and got completely soaked to help me. That gesture restored my faith in humanity." Richard embraced his aunt affectionately. "And I was drowning in meetings and contracts, forgetting what really matters until I saw that scene from my car window." Lucy felt her eyes water. "And I thought I was alone in the world, fighting just for survival, until I found a family in you two." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. The seasons passed, and the partnership among the three flourished in various directions. Mrs. Williams' literary mentoring program expanded to other communities, becoming an educational model recognized throughout the state. Her methodology, which combined literary classics with life experiences, attracted students of all ages. Richard, transformed by the experience, restructured his businesses, prioritizing projects with positive social impact. The revitalization of degraded areas of the city, previously seen only as profit opportunities, now followed principles of humanized urbanism, preserving communities and local histories. Lucy, balancing her work at the community center with her nursing training, developed an innovative health program for seniors that integrated medical care and emotional well-being. Her work began to gain national recognition, and she was invited to present it at conferences. On a spring afternoon, 2 years after that rainy day that changed their lives, the three were gathered in the garden of Mrs. Williams' house for tea. The elderly woman, seated in her adapted wheelchair, observed with satisfaction the butterflies dancing among the flowers she herself had chosen for the garden. "You know what I've been thinking," she said, her eyes shining with the wisdom that only years can bring. "Maybe we should write our story." Richard and Lucy exchanged curious glances. "What do you mean, Aunt?" Richard asked. "Our story. How such different people met and changed each other's lives. It could inspire more people to believe in the power of small gestures." Lucy smiled, enchanted by the idea. "You would be the perfect author, Mrs. Williams, with all your knowledge of literature." The elderly woman shook her head. "No, my dear. Each of us would write a part from our own perspective. I would start by telling about my life before that rainy day, my lost hopes, my loneliness. You, Lucy, would talk about your daily struggle, your interrupted dreams, your impulse to help even when you yourself needed help. And Richard would share how he observed everything from a distance, how he decided to intervene, and how he ended up being the most transformed of all of us. The proposal was intriguing. In the months that followed, the three dedicated themselves to the project. Mrs. Williams, with her academic experience, structured the book and edited the texts. Lucy, with her sensitivity, ensured that emotions were authentically captured. Richard, with his contacts, found a publisher interested in the publication. The book, titled What the Rain Brought, was launched at the community center on a special afternoon. The line of people waiting for autographs extended around the block. Local journalists covered the event, fascinated by the true story of transformation and human connection. During the book signing, a young student timidly approached Mrs. Williams, Professor Williams, your book changed my view on aging. I've always been afraid of getting old, but now I see it can be a phase of wisdom and new beginnings. The elderly. Woman smiled, touched. My young friend, each phase of life has its challenges and beauties. The secret is to never stop learning, never stop caring for others. Richard, observing the interaction, felt a wave of pride. His aunt at 82 continued to inspire generations. Who could have imagined that the frail lady in the wheelchair, stuck in the rain, would still have so much to offer the world? Lucy, meanwhile, was attending to a line of healthcare professionals interested in her integrated care methodology for seniors. Her program, initially small and local, was now a reference and was being implemented in other cities. How did you manage to develop something so innovative at such a young age? Asked an admiring nurse. Lucy smiled, looking in Mrs. Williams's direction. I had the best teacher. She taught me that caring goes far beyond technique. It involves seeing the whole person, their history, their dreams, even when the body no longer cooperates as before. The success of the book brought visibility not only to the three authors, but also to the causes they championed. Donations began to arrive for the community center. Universities invited Mrs. Williams to lecture on education and literature. Business people sought out Richard, interested in learning how to authentically integrate social responsibility into business. One afternoon, while reviewing the overloaded schedule of commitments that had emerged after the book's publication, Mrs. Williams made a perceptive observation. Look, my dears, isn't it ironic? I spent years feeling that I had been forgotten, that my time to contribute was over. Now at 82, I'm more active and relevant than ever. You were always relevant, Lucy protested. The world just took a while to notice. Richard nodded, and I was the slowest of all to see it. Imagine how many years we lost, Aunt. If I had realized your value sooner, Mrs. Williams raised her hand, interrupting him. Nothing is lost, Richard. The important thing is that we're together now, building something meaningful. And perhaps, if it had happened before, it wouldn't have had the same impact. Everything has its time. The elderly woman's wisdom always surprised them. Her ability to find meaning even in painful experiences was a constant lesson for both. As time passed, the trio expanded their initiatives. Richard used his business influence to create a foundation dedicated to improving the quality of life for elderly people in vulnerable situations. Lucy, now graduated and with a postgraduate degree in geriatrics, led the foundation's medical team. Mrs. Williams, as mentor and inspiration, actively participated in strategic planning, bringing the perspective of someone who lived the reality of aging. 3 years after the fortuitous encounter in the rain, they celebrated the inauguration of the Foundation's 10th shelter home for the elderly. During the ceremony, a reporter asked Richard what motivated him to invest so much in a cause usually neglected by the private sector. Before I only built buildings, he replied, looking fondly at his aunt and Lucy. Now we build communities. I understood that the true legacy isn't in physical structures, but in the lives we touch. Lucy, observing the crowd of smiling elderly people participating in the inauguration, felt a deep gratitude. She remembered her days of struggle when she could barely pay rent and balance 2 jobs with her studies. How could she have imagined that a simple act of kindness on a rainy day would take her so far? That night, the 3 dined together at Mrs. Williams' house, as had become tradition. The elderly woman, serving the tea she herself prepared with herbs from her garden, made a special toast. To unexpected encounters and second chances, she said, raising her cup. And to the rain that soaked me, but brought light to all of us. Richard and Lucy smiled, touched by the profound simplicity of the words. You know what fascinates me about our story, Lucy commented. How everything could have been different if I had chosen another path that day, or if you, Richard, hadn't been passing down that street at exactly that moment. Or if I had given up on going out on that rainy day, added Mrs. Williams. Sometimes I think it was destiny. Richard, usually practical and rational, was surprised to find himself agreeing. Perhaps there are greater forces than we understand, guiding our steps. The 3 remained silent for a moment, contemplating the mysterious paths that had united them. "What moves me the most," continued Mrs. Williams, "is realizing that it's never too late to start over. At 79, I thought my story was ending. Now at 82, I realize it was just beginning a new chapter, perhaps the most significant of all." "You've always been a teacher, Mrs. Williams," said Lucy, affectionately holding the elderly woman's hand. "Now, you've just expanded your classes, beyond university halls." "And you, my dear," replied Mrs. Williams, her eyes shining with pride, "have always been a caregiver, long before your nursing degree. It's your nature to care, to offer help, even when you yourself need support." Richard observed the interaction between the two women who had transformed his life. His aunt, whom he had almost pushed away in the name of progress, and the young woman who had taught him the true meaning of success. How grateful he was for that reign, for that encounter, for that second chance. The news arrived on an autumn morning, almost a replica of the one that had united them years ago. The book, What the Rain Brought, had been selected for the National Literary Award in the Life Narratives category. The award ceremony would take place in New York the following month. Mrs. Williams received the news with surprise and humility. "Just imagine, being recognized not for my academic work, but for sharing our personal story. Life is truly unpredictable." The trip to New York was carefully planned, considering all of Mrs. Williams's needs. Richard insisted on using his private jet, ensuring maximum comfort. Lucy organized all the medical details, making sure that all necessary medications and equipment were available. On the night of the award ceremony, Mrs. Williams surprised everyone with her vitality. Elegantly dressed, with her white hair perfectly arranged, she radiated a beauty that only well-lived years can confer. Beside her, Richard, in an impeccable dark suit, and Lucy in a navy blue dress, formed an image that captured the essence of their story. 3 generations, 3 different trajectories, united by bonds that transcended blood and circumstances. When the presenter called What the Rain Brought as the winner of the category, the entire auditorium gave a standing ovation. Mrs. Williams, in her wheelchair, was led to the stage by Richard and Lucy. The 3, holding hands, represented the central message of the book, the strength of human connection and the beauty of unexpected encounters. At the microphone, Mrs. Williams spoke with the eloquence that had marked her entire career as a professor. "This award doesn't just celebrate a book, but a journey that began with a simple act of kindness on a rainy day. I want to dedicate it to everyone who, like Lucy, stops to help when it would be easier to move on, and to everyone who, like my nephew Richard, has the courage to re-examine their values and change direction. Above all, I dedicate this award to every person who feels invisible, forgotten, or obsolete. Your story isn't over. Perhaps it's just beginning." The words moved the audience. Richard, usually reserved in public, couldn't hold back his tears. Lucy, beside him, squeezed his hand in silent support. Back in Seattle, life continued its course, now enriched by the public recognition of their story. The community center expanded its programs, the foundation opened more shelter homes, and Mrs. Williams' educational model was implemented in schools across the country. On a peaceful afternoon, as the 3 enjoyed the sun in the garden of Mrs. Williams' house, the elderly woman made an observation that captured the essence of their entire journey together. "You know what's the greatest lesson I've learned in all these years? That the meaning of life is in the connections we make. Not in power, not in money, not even in knowledge. It's in the moments when we truly touch someone's life." Richard, who had once valued material success above all, nodded in agreement. "If it weren't for you two, I would still be building empty empires, believing I was accomplishing something great. And I would just be surviving, not really living," added Lucy. "You taught me that I can make a difference even with limited resources." Mrs. Williams smiled, satisfied. "And I would have spent my last years in solitude, believing that my contribution to the world had ended. You showed me that there's always a new chapter to be written." The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. The shadows lengthened in the garden, but within them a light remained constant, the light of the affection they had built together, of the shared mission, of the dreams they would still achieve. "Look at that magnificent sunset," Mrs. Williams commented, her tired eyes still able to appreciate beauty. "As beautiful as the dawn," Lucy replied, smiling. Richard looked at the two women who had rewritten his story. "And to think it all began with rain," Mrs. Williams laughed softly. "Sometimes we need to get a little wet to find the true meaning of life." In that moment, under the colorful sky, the three knew, without needing to say it, that no matter what the future held, difficulties, challenges, changes, they would face it together, as the family they had become, not by blood, but by choice. And as the sun disappeared on the horizon, one certainty remained. Some encounters are so powerful that they can transform not only individual trajectories, but create waves of change that extend far beyond the initial moment. An act of kindness, an attentive look, a second chance, sometimes that's all we need to rewrite not just our story, but the story of many others. The end of the story. And you, what did you think of this story? Have you ever experienced a moment when a simple gesture completely changed your life? Share with us in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next heart-touching emotional stories.